Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is such a pleasure having you all here in attendance today. My name is Yovany Jerez. I am the Vice President of the Alumni Society, and I'm so thrilled to welcome you all to SocietyCast in partnership with Twilio, which I first want to formally thank and recognize for their partnership and for their rooted commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Twilio is a known trailblazer in this space, which is why we're very excited to hear from members of their team in just a few short moments about how they approach and how they explore different channels to successfully leverage inclusivity in the workplace. And here at the Alumni Society, our goal is to create a very inclusive space where our members can foster meaningful connections with each other, with our partners, with the community at large. And this is a network of some of the most brilliant Latino leaders in the country. And so we're so eternally grateful to all of you for your continued support and your continued engagement, whether it's in virtual settings like this or in person. We're just coming off the heels of our annual leadership summit, which we hosted for the first time after 2 years being virtual. And it took place last month here in New York City. And it was just so energizing to see so many of you together again. So for anyone who's there, thank you for being there. Now, about our gathering here today, we like to tackle a variety of topics and trends here at SocietyCast. And the goal of SocietyCast, it's one goal, right, which is to provide our participants, our members, with actionable insights that you can apply in your careers, as well as at your own organizations. And so with that, I'll take a quick moment to give a brief rundown of how this event is going to go. So we're going to first have about 35 minutes to chat with our speakers, followed by an interactive Q&A session with all of you. So do have questions ready. You can drop those questions anytime throughout the event into the chat box. However, since we're a small and intimate group and entre familia, as I always like to say, you can feel free to just speak up, raise your hand, and ask your questions directly to the group. The only ask is when you're posing questions or comments, just to go ahead and sort of state your name and company that you work for, so that we can also get to know you. And on that note, because the Alumni Society is all about authentic connections and relationships, do feel free to start, putting your LinkedIn profiles into the chat box, so you can just drop those in, and it's an opportunity for you to connect with each other, as well as we're here to learn with and about our good friends at Twilio. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers. So first, moderating this discussion is Melissa Toledo. Melissa is Twilio's Manager of Latin American and Caribbean Sales, and joining her is Tom Martinez, who's a Senior Vice President, go-to-market operations, as well as Daisy Peña. And Daisy is the Director of Sales, Mid-Market Retail over at Twilio. So Daisy, Tom, Melissa, thank you all so much for joining us here today. We're excited to kickstart this conversation. And so with that, Melissa, the floor is yours. Feel free to take it away.
Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm actually saying good morning from Monterrey, Mexico. I am tired. I apologize. We delayed coming out of Mexico City, but thank you all for joining us for this Unleashing the Power of Inclusive Leadership conversation. My name is Melissa Toledo, or Toledo, depending where you're from or how you look at the pronunciation of the name, which I think is something that falls within this topic. I'm currently managing a team of 11 growth account executives for our Spanish-speaking LATAM team here at Twilio. And today I'm, joined by colleagues Tom and Daisy, who I absolutely look up to. I think they're absolutely great role models, especially for Latinx community at Twilio and at large. So we're excited to have you here with us today, and we have an awesome discussion about cultivating inclusive workplaces and creating environments where all voices are heard. And before I go into introducing Tom and Daisy, of course, I have to give you a little bit more insight into what Twilio is. So Twilio is a customer engagement platform used by hundreds of thousands of businesses and more than 10 million developers worldwide to build unique, personalized experiences for their customers. We were developer focused initially, and we still are, but of course are starting to expand to different personas as we grow the business. We're known for democratizing channels like voice, text, chat, video, etc. through APIs, which makes us unique. And it makes it easier for every organization to build meaningful interactions with customers on the channels they prefer and the language they prefer and so on. And that's just the beginning. So with over a year ago now, we acquired Segment, which is the world's leading customer data platform, which we now use to empower businesses to capture full first-party data in real time, analyze it, and then use all of that data to enrich those conversations or communications that are happening through our APIs. So enough about business, enough about Twilio. I would like to now introduce our panelists. Daisy, if you can get us started, I'd love to know location, your role, and then the typical fun fact that we usually ask for in events like this.
Sure. Hi, Melissa. It's great to share a panel with you. And thanks for obviously speaking so highly of us. Hi, everyone. I'm Daisy Peña. I'm the director of retail here at Twilio, based out of New York. I'm not currently in Manhattan, but that's normally where I live during the week. So you'll hear my lawnmower taking place in the back end. And a fun fact about me is that I just came back from vacation in Europe and got engaged. So I am now engaged, which is made the trip memorable nonetheless.
Daisy, that's fantastic. I didn't know that news. That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'll go next. I'm Tom Martinez. I run go-to-market operations at Twilio. I've been here for about 4.5 years. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is where I'm at the moment. And fun fact, I love anything that gets the adrenaline flowing. So skydiving, bungee jumping, driving race cars. I don't get to do it very often. My wife and I, we have 2 little boys, and my wife gets too nervous. So when I can, when the time is right, I enjoy those kind of things too. Just let loose a little bit and really take you outside of the day job and all the stresses of work on a daily basis.
Need to get your tips on skydiving one day.
It's fun. It's fun.
When Tom isn't responding to my emails, I know it's because he's out racing cars then or jumping out of airplanes.
I try to respond to emails.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for the introduction. So we'll go ahead and dive into the questions. I think the first one, and then of course, Tom or Daisy, it goes to either one of you. But for you, what does diversity look like in the workplace?
Sure, I'm happy to go first. So diversity in the workplace, my view of it is, first of all leaders understanding what are their diversity gaps, and understanding, essentially like their strengths, the backgrounds of the individuals that they brought on. And similarly, that essentially translates into the entire company, understanding diversity gaps. So first of all, understanding them. And goals are, essentially addressing those gaps by putting in the effort, cascading to leaders to be owners, to take it upon themselves and build targets, and oftentimes partnering with recruiters, and also utilizing social media outlets, utilizing LinkedIn to put in the word out there that you're seeking diverse candidates. And sometimes that diverse candidate isn't necessarily someone of color. It may be the male on the team, God forbid, because we have a very male-dominated industry in tech. And I feel like sometimes I've had to emphasize like balancing that out. I need to make sure that I'm not just hiring one kind of, group of people or another. And I think when the company looks at that as a whole and is constantly on top of the gaps that each team has and the gap that we have as a company, and everyone takes ownership, diversity goals can be achieved.
I would add to that. When I think about it, to me, there are a lot of means to the end. What I think about it is it's really when there are a variety of voices and experiences that come to light and are heard across the company, and that are coming from every level. So they're not just being heard from a lower level, and then it kind of stops and it's a homogenous group at the top. It has to be heard, but it also has to come from every level, which means it has to exist across every level. And in my experience, that's the hard part. That's where it tends to break, even for companies that are very deliberate and focused on this effort. There's a lot of history, particularly in the U.S., but really globally, that has built the structure that exists today over generations. And so really changing that takes a very concerted effort. At the end of the day, when you see not the I don't mean see in terms of the outward characteristics of individuals, but when you see the dialogue and the presence of different ideas from different backgrounds and different experiences, it's a pretty beautiful thing.
Yeah, completely agree with both those inputs, those comments. I think going into the next question has a little bit to do with this creating the diversity, but it's hiring, right? We have the honor, but also challenge of hiring, because I know hiring isn't always easy and straightforward, but I know as I grew my team to 11 account executives, hiring for sales, you have to go beyond the typical, like, oh, they come already from a very established corporation that sells SaaS. If you go beyond that, you start creating a team with people who, my top performer, who's the longest Bogota-based AE, started as a CSM, and he's absolutely doing amazing things here. And then there's someone who's never been in sales or at a tech corporation ever. He's like the second greatest. And so I love all my AEs equally, but it's something I've learned, and it was challenging, but you have to keep an open mind when hiring, and beyond, right, the female male, but also experience and background and what they've actually sold versus what they haven't, and look beyond the resume or the LinkedIn, but actually speaking to the person and get to know them. That's worked for me. So I'd love to hear from both of you how you leverage hiring to create that diversity.
Sure. I can go. Tom, I think a lot of it is what you shared also, Melissa, and then taking ownership. I do love to shout out, like, speaking at panels like this does help bring diversity. But it's also, I think, put emphasis on understanding your diversity gaps and understanding, like, what is the, additional bit of value or background that could make you a stronger team. And also allowing your team to be to help generate more diverse talent, and spread the word, whether it's that strong female male candidate that comes from an interesting background. They probably have a network themselves that they can spread the word. So I always encourage just like referrals from those that I enjoy working with on my team, which is always helpful. And I think also understanding how the collaboration with recruitment teams can play a part, making it a goal to check in with them, not just expecting your recruiters to send you those diverse candidates, but putting in the effort to make it a goal and how go after it like a target. But yeah, just as valuable, it's the background and having those be different, as also balancing out the ratios, whether it's LGBT or someone in within the team that's going to really emphasize and strengthen us.
I agree with that. I think it's also about really working hard to maintain it in your consciousness of particularly in a high growth environment, when at times it's just the pressure of, man, we have to keep pace with the growth. We really need to build the team. And that can lead to efforts to hire fast and a focus on that, while maintaining a bar, but also losing focus from really shaping the organization to what is appropriate. And excuse me one moment.
Oh,
Could you excuse me?
This is like the best part about doing kind of things
I
remote, is that you get to see who we really are.
he's
So,
a
I don't
mini
know. I have the blurred background. I don't know if he came through on it. Yeah, that's my youngest, Gus. He's 6. He just came back from some candy making camp from the morning. Wanted to show me his peep.
My 6-year-old is at camp, so I totally get it. He may show up in a little bit too.
I think I appreciate the reactions. I personally love it as well. Those micro moments, I don't want those to ever go away. But back to the topic, it takes focus and effort to build a diverse team, and that means stepping back and looking at thinking about what are your blind spots as a leader, as a hiring manager. Of is the team becoming too much of X potentially, or does it have does it run the risk of being perceived as too much of X? And someone mentioned in the chat examples that I've encountered many times over of companies or departments hiring too many ex Salesforce people. Maybe the perception, reality or otherwise, And you have to look at that. And, one of the areas that I'm very conscious of, now I've been at Twilio for 4.5 years, but it was, when I came in, so new to Twilio, most of my network was not within Twilio, it was outside of Twilio. And so where did I do my hiring from? Did I, bring in all folks from the outside, or did I look at also ensuring that I was supporting advancement and promotion from within? And so all those ways of looking at diversity as a hiring manager and as a leader, thinking about, and there are so many ways to cross cut it. The male female balance, for example, the internal external, and across all different varieties of experience. So it really doesn't just happen, is the point I'm trying to emphasize. You have to be very deliberate, and you have to look at it as objectively as you possibly can and seek input from other folks. Be open to what people are saying and responding. When you hear comments like that, and it was a great one that was in the chat of, if there is a voice going across the organization of, we're just becoming, when I was at Salesforce, the version of that was heard and told many times is, we're just hiring all ex-Oracle people. Salesforce is becoming Oracle. And that was not what anyone wanted. Salesforce had its own culture. We wanted to protect that. Twilio has its own culture. We want to protect that. So those are great examples, and they're real. And so you have to be in tune with them and realize, well, what are we doing either to reinforce that perception or to counter that perception? And again, it crosses so many different dimensions. You have to be really thoughtful about that, including, early in career versus late in career, and what experiences does that bring forward to make the company better and stronger.
Yeah, I completely agree. I giggle a little because I am ex-Salesforce, but I do.
As am I.
Yeah, I think we all did, right? We all did. But it's true, in the hyper growth, as a hiring manager, you have expectations, you have headcount you need to take advantage of. And if you don't, you're going to lose it. And so you try to do the fastest, most comfortable decision, but it's keeping conscious, you said, Tom, keeping an open mind, making sure you're challenging yourself in the profile you're looking for. And we were starting to become an Oracle / ex-Genesis shop as well in LATAM. And I think we've taken a step back and be like, all right, let's really think about what we want to be as a Twilio LATAM team and go from there. To you, Tom, because I think it's a little different from Daisy and I, but you hire actual managers who then have either managers and then, individual contributors or I guess, individual contributors to some sort. So what do you do to ensure that the leadership team you're bringing to Twilio is inclusive and diverse, beyond maybe what you had mentioned before?
I think one of the things, by the way, this is a journey, and I'm still working on it. I'm working to be better at it. But I think it starts with having a frequent dialogue about it. And again, particularly in the context of rapid growth, it can be elevated and everyone can be aligned to it, aspire to it, and then it can just wane over time. You can't let that happen. So you have to follow up and make sure that it remains a topic of discussion, a focus of reviewing the candidate slates, and does it represent a diverse population, or a given role? Are you only seeing, particularly when you're talking about senior level hires, are you only seeing white males or XYZ, and then challenging that if that's all that is surfacing? And what I find more helpful than just challenging that, although it does start with having that conversation and setting the expectation with my directs of how I want them to approach hiring and their consciousness around it. And you need to get really, I believe, more proactive with thinking about how do we break the cycle? Because that's one of the challenges, is it's generally not the easiest path. And so how do you help them? If you really want to see different results, well, then it's often, and I think there was some reference in the chat of working with the recruiting team and looking at what are some of the options, what are some of the best practices? How do we invite and attract a more diverse pipeline of talent? I don't believe you can just say, the pipeline is what it is, and therefore we are kind of at the mercy of that. No, you have to change the game, and you have to change your recruiting tactics and how you go up making it happen. But I believe just pushing on my directs to say effectively, do better find more diverse talent, that's not very helpful. So partnering with them and with the talent acquisition team to look at what are we going to do differently to change that mix. But again, keeping that very active dialogue and ensuring there's commitment across the board to what we're trying to do. That's how I go about trying to influence it across my team.
Awesome, thank you. And Daisy, if I'm correct, you started the retail team all by yourself, and so you're building that. Is there anything you do specifically to make sure that this new team that you're building at Twilio is also diverse and inclusive out of the gate?
Sure. It's a lot of what I shared earlier, and I think that Tom brings up a good point, which is that it is a journey, that it is something that I'm constantly seeking to improve. I think inclusivity, when I think of that equal balance and equal access you want to have for your team, it trickles down to me to ensuring that people feel accepted, that I'm amplifying softer voices. And one of the things that I do and that I encourage is the development of one's personal brand, making sure that people are investing in having a voice that's unique to them, authentic to them, and that they're investing in developing that and creating that sort of aura of who they are for confidence and for also other leaders and peers to build trust in who they are. And then checking my own favoritism at the door. I'm human, and oftentimes we organically just connect with certain folks more than others because we have like-minded interests, you name it. But it's ensuring that I'm not treating people differently, that I'm treating everyone equal, and that I'm open and honest with the fact that, look, I have to check my favoritism at the door. I lead a team. I have to ensure that everyone feels like they're treated equally, and ensure that people feel like they have a unique voice and that they're working to develop that personal brand, if you will. And I think that's how you achieve, in a perfect world, inclusivity will always be a journey. Sometimes it can evolve to be, making sure that you're hiring, and fostering that inclusive environment. But I think these areas really help, and I have felt good about the outcome that we've had.
Daisy, you brought up a great point of something I didn't mention, and kind of taking the question a little bit in a different direction of beyond just the immediate hiring of leadership and ensuring a diverse slate there. Looking across the organization of where can you lean in and help elevate others. It's so, for me, it's so gratifying and so rewarding to be able to do that, to be able to use my position of privilege, of power and influence to help someone else, and particularly as I feel a very strong affinity to the Latinx community in that area. And it may not be for an immediate role or opening, and it may not be for a senior position at this time, but it all starts somewhere. And if you can help advance someone's career or accelerate their trajectory, it is such, again, a little bit personal preferences here, but it's such a good feeling.
Yeah, like that mentorship aspect of really empowering others to lean into their personal brand, which I know is really important. I think so. Raul Rincon, and he's been my mentor here at Twilio. He now just took on the global position of Flex at Twilio, but he gave me my opportunity to join LATAM, and then gave me an opportunity to be a manager. I have no manager experience, but I think without someone, and not necessarily having to be Latinx or not, but that has your back and will support you through your journey, whether it's within a company or not, is amazing. And so I think for everyone who's on, if you have that ability to mentor someone or to help them through a journey to a level up in their career, I highly recommend it, because it makes a big difference. Oh, I think someone.
Melissa, I do have a comment on that. I took an inventory of what I wanted to do in the world and my values and my vision, and it included lifting someone up, right? Bringing up Latinas in tech. But then I looked at my calendar and I realized there are no such relationships happening. And so I realized when I was early career, I really hesitated to reach out. I thought, why would they want to talk to me? I just felt a lot of the insecurities. And so then I went on a little bit of a business development tour looking for mentees within Alumni Society, LinkedIn, my company, and now I have a couple of relationships. But I'd say to the people here, if you want to do it, sometimes you have to be more proactive with the early career folks.
I couldn't agree more. I think that that's something that I've taken upon myself as well. And I'll use Melissa as an example, when she called out prior to joining leadership, just reaching out, just despite my busy schedule, what feels most rewarding to me is contributing to the development of one's growth. And especially, it's what led me to leadership, because it's what I really, what fulfilled me the most. And it is being proactive. It is saying like, hey, I think I can help you there. And I don't know if I'm going to be your mentor per se, but maybe you can bounce some thoughts off of me, and that leads you to the mentor, because it's also a personal connection, and it may be that you're that sponsor that tells them who they should talk to. And so, yeah, I think the proactivity aspect of it, and again, taking ownership, does really help. It makes a difference.
Yeah, completely. And Rose, thank you so much for sharing that. I think I actually posted on LinkedIn about someone had reached out to me about growing their Latinx, and they just found me randomly and took that, that approach of just reaching out and asking if I'd chat. And we met in person finally, like 2 years later. And it's just so rewarding because you connect on a different level, and it doesn't have to be within the company. But yeah, I'm at my LinkedIn, Melissa Toledo Montgomery. It's my name, my husband's last name that I semi have, semi don't. But if you want to add me, reach out to me. I think I would say the same for Tom and Daisy if you want to add them on LinkedIn. But we're here to support however we can. I think that's why we're excited about this speaking opportunity as well. I lost track of what I was going to comment earlier. I think, Tom, to your point about mentoring as well, offering to be a part of interview panels that aren't for your actual team is also a way that you can support, I think, diversity and inclusion. And it's a lot more on your calendar, but knowing that you can be a part of another extended team that doesn't report to you, but you also would be able to help to decide, hey, is this actually a diverse candidate? Is this adding a different point of view to your team? I think is important to consider. And something we've spoke within the Latinx community is changing job descriptions to make them be a little bit more inclusive and not necessarily maybe scare off potential candidates that aren't as competent or might have imposter syndrome. So I highly recommend to anyone who's on the call, if you have the ability to work on job descriptions that get posted, think of different languages, think of different verbiage that might be not come off as scary, or thinking that, oh, I don't know how to do this one thing, so I might not get the job. I think that'll help change this cycle that Tom had mentioned, has kind of come throughout the years of same people being hired and hired over again, especially within certain industries. I don't know if there's any other questions. I think Alumni Society will stop me if there is. But the next question up would be, what does allyship look like in the workplace, and how can you leverage it to respond to microaggressions? It's a little tough.
First one, I'm happy to go first. I mean, this is one that is also kind of a journey. Off the top of my mind, things that I have done that have helped is pulling, if I hear a colleague or a peer say something that comes across as a microaggression, whether to me or a fellow colleague, is pulling that person aside, and the courage to do that, oftentimes is what may or may not be there. It's like you assess things like, well, did they mean it? What was the intention? So I have spent time kind of understanding their intention and kind of approaching it more from the lens of what were your intentions when you said that? And that alone has gotten the person to say, this is what I meant to say. If that wasn't the case, I apologize. It's almost like, they themselves recognize it, but those conversations don't happen often. And I think that they need to happen more, and we need to foster that more, because these are uncomfortable conversations. Allyship, if you're calling someone out like, hey, that offended so-and-so, then it's sort of that public shame that you want to avoid doing. So it really comes from feeling like you are going to go ahead and make a stand and use it as an opportunity to educate someone or learn even from them, and make it a mutual kind of natural curiosity. of like, look, I don't think this sat well, it didn't for me. And I have done that with previous leaders that I've had, which they've applauded me for. Meanwhile, I'm just like, did anyone else pick this up? It felt a little too male heavy. We were not in on the joke. But you have to definitely build the courage and work up the courage to do that, and do it with kindness, and do it with curiosity and seeking to understand the intention. I think we all have a natural good intention, at least you hope, and in a workplace at Twilio where we're trying to foster anti-racism and all these things. However, it doesn't mean that from time to time one of us will slip. So it really is, being able to just come out of that comfort zone and say to that colleague or that peer, like, hey, are you okay? Did that sit well? Or hey, what were your intentions there? I don't know if this sat well. And continuing to do that, I think is what really helps, from my view.
I think that was wonderfully said. I love the idea of replacing judgment with curiosity of where are they coming from? Was it intentional? What can they learn from it? And the way I've come to embrace this is, and I think you articulated very well, that balancing act of, do you try and turn something into a public shaming, and is that really the best course of action, or instead do you try and redirect and help create the right platform, the right desired behavior, instead of just focusing on the negative. And what I try to embrace is to never let an opportunity pass by, right? Don't shy away from it. But it may mean redirecting or trying to correct the situation in a more subtle way. It doesn't always have to be as overt, just as you said, Daisy, but at the same time, don't shy away from it, because that doesn't help, and it tends to leave people exposed, or perhaps just feeling the brunt of that microaggression. And there was an example that occurred just last week, where it I think highlighted a number of things. So I'll quickly share it. I was in a meeting, and it was a fairly sizable meeting with a number of senior folks and junior folks. And a while into it, someone that was on the more junior side spoke up and started sharing some points, and it was a female, and she was interrupted with effectively a +1. So it was a strong kind of enthusiastic endorsement, but what it did was it interrupted her, and she stopped speaking. The person that had was given the +1 started adding some more, and then someone else took it from there. And I want to believe that this person's interruption of that individual was coming from a place of just enthusiasm and passion for the topic. But what happened nonetheless still happened. And so, rather than turn it into a public shaming when someone's I'm going to presume enthusiasm just got the better of them, I turned the conversation back and said, I'm not going to name names, Jill, I think you had more to say. Would you please continue? And just handing the microphone back to her, because I sensed that she was done at that point. She was interrupted, probably was not going to, in her mind, reach out and take that risk again, because she was just cut off, and she was cut off by someone more senior to her as well. So there were a number of dynamics at play. There were level and hierarchy dynamics. There were male-female dynamics, and it didn't sit well with me. I don't know how she felt about it. It was more of the point of, did I have an opportunity to return the mic, give her the platform back, and addressing anything after the fact would not have had the same impact as allowing her to make her point, make her case, and speak her voice in that room. And it's just a really small example of when you're faced with that, like, how do you address this? And you can make it a bigger public thing. And in some cases that may be right, to really put it on the table and address it and have that wake-up call. I'm not suggesting folks shy away from that. What I am suggesting is just don't miss the opportunity. And even if you start off doing something that's subtle, I didn't call anyone out, but I did make sure that it was publicly brought back to her. And I think a few others probably could infer from that, like, hey, something happened here that probably should not have happened. And maybe there are better ways to handle that. I'm not suggesting that was the perfect way. but I do think that you don't want to miss those opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's such a strong symbol of allyship and what you can do. And it happens a lot. And I think it just that the 2 seconds it might have taken you to revert the conversation back to, for example, Jill, could have meant a lot for her. She probably felt empowered and safe. And then also it was a good learning lesson for others who were aware of it. But to your point, some people aren't always aware, or maybe they just reacted in a certain type of way. But if you can do something in the moment, it'll have a stronger impact than maybe waiting or kind of just brushing it off like, oh, I'm sure he didn't mean it. But the curiosity point as well, it sticks out a lot. I think there's a part in Ted Lasso, for those who have seen Ted Lasso, that talks about being curious and not judgmental. It's a really great scene if you haven't seen it. I think there was a question that I was going to pause for. Vivian, can you?
Yeah, Anna Duran had a question in the chat. Anna, I don't know if you want to ask it. Feel free. You don't have to. Otherwise, we'll read it out loud and read it to the speakers. Okay. So why don't we ask the question?
I'm here.
Awesome.
I just found you about 15 minutes before your event, so my camera's not on because I'm a Latina, an older one, but I'm always vain. I have a question. I study scientists primarily, people in STEM professions, but this interests me because I'm writing something on well-being in the workplace right now, especially people who have new ideas. But I want to go back to the recent findings, or not recent, it's been long-term findings that minoritized populations tend to leave their jobs in the STEM professions, for example, after about 7 to 10 years, especially women. So I'm wondering if you could talk more about the retention and development efforts. I'm starting to hear a little bit, but my worry is that we only focus on recruitment, but people are going to leave 7 to 10 years from now. Is that a good thing, or do you think that it's a good idea maybe to keep people and see them move up the organization? So anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you, Anna. I have some thoughts there, but I think Tom, Daisy, I don't know which one you want to go first, or if you have any comments.
Mel, go ahead.
You're longer.
Yeah. So I think internal mobility upwards, right? That's always the goal. From a business perspective, it makes sense because you've already invested into that individual. And so you want to keep them at the company as long as possible. But I think obviously from like a people manager, empathetic side, you also want to see them grow. Companies change. I think the 3 years I've been at Twilio, I've seen 3 different Twilios because of our rapid growth over the last 2. And so it can be challenging at times, but being a hiring manager, I do try to look within beforehand. There's certain things that make it difficult, say having a LATAM team where you want to hire in region. And so if there's anyone in the US who wants to work for a team, like there's challenges like that sometimes, but I always try looking within first, or I always look to support internal candidates who are going through a process because we want to see them grow and we want them to have move up the ladder within a company. I think retention wise, Twilio, from my point of view, has really noticed that we need to make sure we were retaining people because they're here for a reason and we want them to stay. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean more swag? Does that mean more pay? Does that mean generating a culture of belonging that might have gotten lost from remote work? So to Tom and Daisy's point, it's a journey and we learn every day, I think, how to do it better or what's needed. What helps though is feedback from different groups. So I know being a part of Latinx, we try to be as vocal as we can with Tom, who's our executive sponsor, as well as 2 others, what we might be struggling with or what we're hearing from the community that needs to be improved so that more Latinx Twilions stay, right? And so having that allyship, having that sponsorship that then they can take and voice with the E-team or to, even Jeff Lawson to try to make those change to retain more, in this case, Latinx individuals is really important. And I think it's made a big impact and we're definitely working on it day to day.
Yeah, I think I would add that it also, like, industries have shifted, like tech, I know in particular, has shifted toward where people spend a little less time enrolled than, other industries. And I think that maybe contributes a bit to it. However, as leaders, hiring managers, the things like that we are talking about, practicing that inclusivity, the allyship, the diverse hiring, I think all of that contributes to that longevity in career, and also having, a leader sponsor your continued growth and you continuing to develop and challenge yourself. It's sort of a mutual collaboration also, which is why emphasizing the development of one's brand, unique voice, what is it that you ultimately want to be known for and want to do, and similarly, your managers encouraging, there's, we have LinkedIn Learning, for example, that we offer at Twilio, and other opportunities to grow your skill set, and having just kind of that mutual action plan, if you will, so you can continue to develop your career. I think sometimes the ball either drops on the manager side or on the talent side, because they just want to get, they don't know what they want. They just want more pay. The opportunity isn't there right now, and they don't want to, they're impatient, so they look for it elsewhere. Or is, the managers like has other priorities, such as, kind of like working on delivering their targets or working on, the business priorities. And that's what oftentimes impacts this. But I think with everything that we've talked about, that is the goal, to retain talent for as long as possible. And I think it's something we have to continue to work on. And unfortunately, in my team, like, despite the, recent great resignation, I was fortunate to retain most of that talent within Twilio, with the exception of one that left Twilio. But I think it's continuing to do that, and continuing to do a lot of the same things, and in partnering with my peers to make sure that, I'm incorporating what else is needed to help with that career growth that's going to keep folks challenged and growing.
Yeah, I'll add just a couple of things. Anna, that question, it's so multifaceted, and we could spend days talking about it as people appropriately do. I think a couple of things that tend to bubble up to the top when I talk with folks about this topic, just the common challenge of folks getting to a point, and you mentioned, marginalized populations. Folks get to a point where they just don't see folks that look like them anymore. And usually it's a leveling issue of, beyond X, beyond senior manager, beyond director, beyond VP, whatever it is, when individuals stop seeing individuals that look like them or that they can relate to across some relevant dimension, it tends to reinforce the idea of a glass ceiling. And so helping one, with changing that leadership profile, as we've been talking about, and being very deliberate with the composition of a leadership team, I think that's really important. Two, even in the absence of that leadership team or that composition of the leadership team, helping people see a path forward and where they can go, what their opportunities are, is really important. And there's another dimension that comes up often, and that's around maternity leave, and in some cases it's about paternity leave as well, but more often than not it's about maternity leave. And so one thing that I find to be very important, and that I am very committed to, is being very supportive and outwardly, explicitly supportive of leave, and encouraging folks to do it, encouraging folks to pursue new job opportunities, even in anticipation of leave. And this is where a lot of things get interrupted of, oh, I'd love to pursue that, but that job is here and now, but I know I'm going out on leave in 6 months, and therefore they don't pursue that job. And I encourage people to not think about it that way, to go and pursue what they are qualified for. And then certainly the companies that I've been fortunate to be part of, it is the policy to then be supportive of when someone goes on leave, certainly for maternity or paternity leave, and that should not interrupt someone's career advancement. We have a long way to go as a society, as a tech industry on this dimension, but it's something very tangible to focus on that I think it can lead to different and better results.
That's a good point, thinking about benefits that go beyond monetary, right? Like leave, mental health benefits, all of those are really important now, more than ever, I feel like. So if you have the ability to support that and empower someone to lean into those resources or take that necessarily leave, that helps a lot too. I think right now there's a lot of burnout. And so if you can convince someone to take a break before deciding they just want to maybe move on to something new, that can also help. Thank you, Anna, for that question. I'm excited to see what other research you're doing. I know, so we're into the Q&A now. I think there's a question from Diamond in regards to D&I. I don't know if Diamond, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Oh, it's Melissa Diamond. Sorry.
Hello.
Hi. Oh, my camera's off. Sorry about that. My question, so I'm not part of the Latina community, but I do want to be an advocate. So I'd love to hear firsthand, how I can get started with that and, really how I can best support, this specific group.
Yeah, I think, so we've had a few individuals who don't recognize as Latinx join our Latinx, which is our employee resource group at Twilio Slack channel, and they're aware of like events we have or topics that are coming up. And then if they feel they have a solution or a suggestion, then they'll chime in. If we're doing events, I remember when I first joined Twilio, I did a Cinco de Mayo event in Atlanta for my hub, and it was focused on the education of what really Cinco de Mayo is. And so having my non-Latinx Twilians join and promote that event and then spread the word afterwards, for me at least, was a good show of like allyship and showing that they also want to promote inclusion. So I think for me, that's been the firsthand, like a way that you can get involved. I don't know, Daisy and Tom, I think I've lost your squares, but you're somewhere. I don't know if you have any other advice.
I'm here. No, Melissa, great question, and love that you want to get involved with the Latinx and supporting them as an advocate. Melissa shared some really great points. One of the things I can add to that is, not hesitating to be a mentor to, we have a lot of young Latinx talent at Twilio, and even in other communities that could really benefit from just learning from you and kind of understanding what are some of the similar, roadblocks or objectives that you've had and what you've achieved, and you sharing, your goals as well. And I think all of that really helps because the more advocates we have, that are non-Latinx and just any other underrepresented community, the more advocates we have, the better our voice will be, to be heard, and the more, we carry our message, and the more empowered, the community feels.
I'll just very quickly do a big +1 to what Daisy just said, and Melissa, thank you for the question. Thanks for being here. I think just by the fact that you're here, I'm 100% confident that you will find those ways and connect those dots to continue to be a really strong ally. So you're taking the right steps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vivian, I don't know. Let's see if there were next question. I see a long.
I do see
we have
another
two questions. First, Vaneza Gutiérrez, if you want to ask it, feel free. And then after that, we'll go to Yovany.
Sure. Hi. So my question was, do you think it's possible to anticipate and preemptively fix issues that may cause employees to leave due to lack of opportunity for minorities or a lack of diversity in the company? How do you accomplish that without being accused of favoring people of color? I noticed that this was an issue at a prior employer, and it caused kind of like this dislike or bitterness for people of color because the people that were upset assumed that they were hired or promoted to fit quotas as opposed to hired based upon like skills or qualifications. And as a Latina, it made me extremely uncomfortable to the point where it was one of the reasons that I ultimately left my role.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
Great point. Strong point there. I'll take one stab at, I think, a way to help with that, touching a lot on some of the comments I made earlier around that favoritism awareness, and also creating that culture where your leaders are emphasizing that this is something that they're prioritizing, favoritism awareness, making sure that the efforts that you're making on helping a POC or someone in a marginalized community don't get looked at as favoritism, but more or less you amplifying a softer voice, you creating a culture of acceptance, of equality, and really continuing to emphasize that message. It's not always perfect. It doesn't always sit well with everyone. I know that. I also have been part of that, and that POC or individual may feel completely alienated and left out, and as a result leave. So you need leaders to step up and really make sure that that message is being prioritized around favoritism, inclusivity, and the reason why some of these areas are a focus with the diversity goals that we have. And that I think ultimately is what helps even things up a little, but it's a very sensitive area, and definitely you have to be cautious of how it lands.
Yeah, I would add there the way that the greater company is promoting the process, or I guess what they're trying to accomplish is important, right? You're not just trying to increase the amount of POCs at a company, but you're trying to actually make it a more diverse and inclusive culture overall, which goes beyond the color of skin or beyond, the sex. It goes, how do people think, and what are different experiences, and why are we going about doing this? And so I know that not everybody can control that message, but if you can give that feedback to someone who's helping create that messaging, that's really important. And also, if you see someone who you can promote within, who you can mentor, and take that opportunity to reach out to them directly and have it more of a one relationship versus, I guess, maybe publicly putting in front of everyone, then it's not necessarily favoritism, or might not look like favoritism, but you're still doing what you can to help create more leadership that might be for minorities or higher up opportunities. But it is tough. And I think, again, something we work on day to day. I think something we try not fixing, but working on through an employee engagement survey that's taken every 6 months. And within that, we really ask employees, do you feel safe? Do you feel like you belong at Twilio? And are there things that don't work for you? And those results go all the way up through different managers, all the way up to the E-team. And if they identify a group who is challenging, or who's having challenges, or who doesn't feel inclusive, they come to the ERGs and they come to different leaders and say, hey, this is what we're hearing. Like, how can we work together to fix it? We don't always have the answers, but at least we know that there's the intent to try to improve it so people feel more comfortable and there isn't necessarily that bitterness amongst the company. And Tom, if you want to add anything before we go to the next question.
I'm conscious of time, but I will add, I think that the surveys that we do are really important. And I think that that is actually a really good practice that I would strongly recommend companies embrace. The consistency of those surveys, the thoroughness and thought process and review is really important. They're taken very seriously, and I think that's great. Exit interviews are critically important to try and get to the heart of what is really driving someone's departure and making sure that's understood. And then I think there's another part, which are the round tables to try and go beyond the surveys and really extract out and try and solicit the true feelings, the challenges, the opportunities of what are we struggling with as a community, and what can the company do better. And if you put all that together, it's really about the dialogue that you're having of that's really hard to do if you don't have the building blocks in the first place, the foundational trust to actually get people to show up and share. So it all comes back to that, and thinking about the format, who, and how do you earn that trust in order to have the truth come to the surface, because it won't otherwise. No one's going to confide their challenges, their feelings, their complaints, their concerns, their fears to someone that they just don't trust.
Yeah. +1 to that.
Points. Just be mindful of time.
Yes.
Yeah, 3. Oh, sorry. I was going to say we do have 3 minutes. There's a couple more questions in the chat. Yovany, you were next. I saw you had 2 questions. So if you want to.
Yeah, maybe I could integrate them. I could
Yeah,
integrate them
go
both, right?
Um,
Just wanted to find out your Latino ERG, right? What is it doing to educate young Hispanics on the power of Twilio and as a tech platform? And if you guys are conducting, I don't know, workshops or somehow finding a way to socialize that at a bigger level, so we can start, introducing to the next generation of Latino entrepreneurs out there, technology from the very get-go, right? And also that question also ties to my concept of, does Twilio have some sort of a fund to support Latina entrepreneurs, and any early seed funding out there? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yovany, for your question. So from the LATAM standpoint, I can say that we're building certain partnerships, not necessarily the Latinx ERG, but yes, the sales side and the team that works on Latin America. We're working on partnerships that we can help educate early startups that are coming out of Latin America, Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, on what Twilio does, giving credits if we can, and making sure that out of the gate, they understand how Twilio can empower their startup and empower their business. Twilio overall has 2 different startup offerings, Twilio Launch and Twilio for Startups. So they're not specific for Latinx startups, but they are for just startups overall within the world. And then in regards to like workshops or hackathons put on by the ERG, we've not done anything like that so far. I think, to be completely honest, there was way more bandwidth, budget, and so on 2 years ago to do more events that were external. We partnered with Taqueria on different things, but right now we're focusing on how we become better internally from my point of view. And this is something I'll definitely take back to them so we can consider doing that in the future, because I do think it's an important and interesting concept to consider for next year. Tom, Daisy, I don't know if you have anything to add about this question or overall, since we're at time and we'll have to do a quick wrap up.
I will just share a link to our Twilio does have a venture capital
Twilio
for,
Ventures.
entrepreneurs. It's not for Latino Latinx, Yovany, but check it out. Definitely for builders. And there's definitely funding to be had from that.
I put a link into what we call the Hatch program, which is an apprenticeship program targeted at underrepresented communities. And that's been very well received, and a lot of great success stories coming out of that group as well. I know we're at time, so I just want to say thank you all for having us.
Add me on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions that you didn't get touched on today. Let us know. Thank you all for joining, and thank you, Alumni Society, for having us.
Thank you all so much, speakers. It was great insights. And again, all the members, thank you for joining, seeing so many friendly faces. We'll see you all very soon. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.